Recording in progress.
I think, yeah, there we go.
Recording in
Themselves with the
progress.
tools to propel themselves forward. Every young person deserves the opportunity to expand their skills and lead the change within their communities. To do that, they need to be equitably and ethically compensated for their time, to meet their daily needs, and to be able to prioritize this invaluable work. Okay, next slide, please. So welcome. All of you are already doing this, but feel free to introduce yourselves into the chat. Use your name, pronouns, organization, location, and an emoji to show how your day is going so far. Yeah, so feel free to network in the chat. I think you can message people one-to-one now. Put your questions in the Q&A throughout the presentation. This allows us as presenters and facilitators to track questions. We can type answers to your questions directly and mark if they've been answered on air. The slides and recording will be available on our website. We'll also be sending out all the stip links and the PowerPoints as a PDF after this. And if you can complete our post-webinar survey so we can improve our information for the next time, that will be great. And Kayla Crawl, who is our Zoom guru, she will be manning the technical side of things. Her email's there, kayla.crawl at NN4youth.org, so you can instant message them directly or use their email. Okay. Next slide. Love the list of logos here. We have a grid crew with us today. This is the introductory period. And then Katie's going to talk about the Youth Compensation Legal Guide. And then Ricardo is going to talk about business law basics, transformative processes for ICU agreements, and then intro to cooperatives. And then we're going to do our breakout rooms. And we have some wonderful moderators. We'll have a group for youth or lived experience, because we had quite a few that identified as 25 plus. And then our second one will be for community supporters. So choose the one that you self-identify with, and that will be our breakout rooms for there. Okay, next slide. Our speakers, we have Ricardo Nunez of the Sustainable Economies Law Center, Katie Scott from the National Homelessness Law Center, Jack Tate from True Self LLC, and Maria Aoki Chavez from La Lima Conbeat LLC. I'm excited to work with these individuals, and I'm really excited that they get to showcase their work. Just a little bit about the National Network for Youth. We are a membership organization, but we do legislative policy work at the federal and state level, and we also do a bunch of great things at the community level as well. Next slide. And some of our programs, we have youth leadership and partnership. We have the National Youth Advisory Council. We do the policy advocacy and supporting communities. I'm reading through these slides so that way we can get to the meat really quickly. But you'll have this information so you can reference it and contact us afterwards if you're interested. Next slide. NN4Y is launching a new tool for young leaders, our Youth Leadership Certificate Series. I don't know if any of my current participants are online, but this is a 6-module series where individuals learn about youth advocacy, the homelessness system, project management, the logistics of running a youth action board. And so we do have an interest form. So if that's something you might be interested in bringing to your community, feel free to do so then. Okay, next slide. And then we want to talk about this great resource called the I Am Here Vital Document Legal Hotline for Youth. This is a really great project, and it's a free, dedicated, state-specific legal assistance hotline for youth experiencing homelessness to help obtain state ID cards and licenses, birth certificates, social security cards, and documents needed to obtain an ID and license. So this is definitely worthwhile to follow up after the webinar for sure. Okay. We had the survey link. Hopefully when you saw the flyer, you also caught the survey here too. So this is just helping our work group, do our work even better. And so if you can fill that out, we have the QR code, and then we'll be sharing the link to that throughout the webinar as well. And yes, we will be getting a link to the PowerPoint slides shortly, Marissa. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Barbara, and thanks National Network for hosting us. I am going to give just a quick overview of the Youth Compensation Legal Guide. For those who were at the National Prevention Learning Collaborative presentation, some of this may be a little redundant, so you may have heard it before, but it is good to sometimes get that repetition. But then Ricardo's presentation will be all new information, so bear with if you already heard some of this. We've already talked a little bit about our speakers, so I will move on as well as our agenda. So just want to give a quick shout out. These slides were also created by Sophie Fashana, who some of you may know, direct cash transfer maven working at Next 100 right now, also incredible foster care and foster youth advocate. So just a little background on why we created the legal guide. Away Home America held some youth compensation town halls where I started to realize that a lot of organizations felt a little lost as to how to structure their compensation side of their youth engagement work. I realized that I was a little lost when I wanted to give someone a $50 gift card for participating in one of our meetings and focus groups. And I was told by my executive director or operations director that I would need a W-9 form, that they would have to, fill that out, and I'd have to do like a stipend letter, and that literally any amount of income in exchange for a service is something that needed to be tracked. And so that made me realize very quickly that like if I, as a lawyer who hadn't done this work, I used to work as like also a tax preparer. So like I should have known that like even a gift card could be considered income. So it made me realize that we needed to do a little more work around this. So we convened the Youth Compensation Advocacy Work Group. Originally, it was like a place for providers to come together to kind of strategize on some of this stuff, but we realized very quickly that our work would not be accountable unless we actually had young people who were doing this work in the space. And so we opened up the group to really anyone who was interested and wanted to join. And the legal guide, it combines a lot of information for service providers and organizations, youth engagement work, but it also provides information for youth and young adults who are engaging in the youth homelessness space, information about their rights, obligations, tips, red flags, and things like that. So I want to shout out, we do have one of the another co-author of the guide, Jack Tate, is going to be facilitating one of our breakout rooms. And we'll talk a little bit more about, right now the legal guide is just sort of like a boring Google Doc, but Jack has done some work to make it more accessible and prettier. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I do want to take a minute to talk about the framing of the legal guide. You know, there's a rich history of youth-led movements and organizing, like where it didn't require like a nonprofit organization to say, hey, let me create a youth action board to, help lead our work. Obviously, nonprofit organizations and government are very different entities than youth-led grassroots movements. And as a result, like some of our efforts to center youth with lived experience has been rocky, and in some cases has caused outright harm to the young people that we're trying to serve. So, there's reasons for this. Often nonprofits are under-resourced. Operations staff are not always like prioritized in nonprofit organizations. So like some places don't even know like who is my HR person, who is the finance person. So if we don't even have that basic structure of organizational staff, it's hard to engage in consistent trauma-informed labor practices. Some young people engaged originally with the organization as a service provider, and now maybe they're moving into a role of employee or contractor. And so there's like a blurred line there, and that can be difficult for all sides. And then also just a lack of understanding of all the legal implications of paying youth for their expertise. But one thing we just wanted to, where we come from in the group is that we do feel that it's a gift when young people with lived experience actually choose to engage with the youth homelessness system and want to work to improve it. And so as a result, even if we're under-resourced, service providers, national organizations, we have an obligation to ensure that we are engaging in consistent, equitable labor practices. And so some of just the simple things that you can do is make sure that you are following all applicable laws, that you are honoring the commitments that you make to young people, and that you use whatever power you have to change policies and practices in response to youth feedback. And again, like the ultimate goal is not to actually have more young people working with youth homelessness organizations. The goal is to make our organizations obsolete, right? Like we want to create a society where youth homelessness does not exist. So keeping in mind what our end goal is important. So I just wanted to give a screenshot here of just a brief overview of what the guide covers. We talk about nonprofit organizations, labor law, contract law, taxes, public benefits, forming and working with micro businesses, and then just the logistics of making and receiving payments. We have a new section that's coming soon, thanks to Jack. It's called Impact and Implementation. It gives some ideas for how you can actually use and implement the guide. And we're also going to be adding more information as we go regarding working with young people with disabilities, and then also a deep dive on name changes and tax issues in the coming months. So I want to give a quick overview of labor law. So this is really the foundational piece where I realized there was a lot of confusion when we first started working on the guide. We've sort of divided the categories when we're thinking about, a young person working with an organization into participant, contractor, or employee. So a participant is someone who receives a stipend, gift card, or incentive to attend, let's say, a meeting, focus group, or training. This is, I think a lot of the entryway that a lot of people end up getting, integrated into some of these various youth action boards and leadership councils. It's a wholly different thing. Like tax law is a whole different category. So even if someone is a participant and they're not, to the level of an independent contractor or employee, that income that they receive may still be taxable depending on their total income, how much they receive this participant income. So this is just something important to know, that even if someone is not an independent contractor or an employee, that income may be taxable to them. An independent contractor is something that is really like carefully defined in the law. And not only like are there some guidelines in the federal law, there's also like each state almost has a test for whether someone is an independent contractor or an employee. So an independent contractor is someone with a specialized skill that is in the business of providing services to others based on that skill. And it's kind of almost like right there in the name, independent, right? It's someone who is able to come in and sort of handle a project from start to finish. There's some other like pieces and parts of this as well, is like that person is not supposed to be doing something that's like core to your business or to your mission, which you might now be thinking as we're working in youth homelessness space, like how many times have we maybe contracted with youth, sort of having them do stuff that we actually do as a part of our mission in the organization? If you're wondering whether or not that's legal according to labor law, the answer is it might not be. Really, what an independent contractor is supposed to come in and do is provide like a skill that the nonprofit organization, for instance, doesn't already have. Like a web consultant is a great example. So this is just something to think about as you're thinking through like ways that you might contract with youth and what you might contract with them to do. Now, if you want to work with youth in ways that are core to your mission, there is another option. It is to hire them as employees. And I know that this, in talking to many organizations over the last couple of years, this can feel like a very overwhelming prospect. But I did want to just say there are several organizations across the country that are doing this, that they're moving to having their youth action board be part-time or per diem employees. We're going to do I think hopefully a webinar about that sometime in the near future. And so just know that it is possible and it is a potentially more ethical way to do this work. We're going to just, I'm just going to briefly share this contract screen. Ricardo's going to go more into like ethical agreements between people who are working together. But just sort of our basic tips are like, if you are engaging in a contract with a young person, being ensured to use plain language, detailed payment information. Contract should not be take it or leave it. These are things that are supposed to be open to negotiation. You should make sure that the young person is receiving a copy of that contract, that they don't just sign it and it goes into the ether, and that make sure that the young person knows who they can reach out to when they have questions about the contract, about payments, whatever it is, that it's not just the program staff that they have access to, but to whoever it is that's actually responsible for doing those payments. I'm just going to touch briefly on taxes. So taxes are something oftentimes people don't assume that they're earning enough money to owe taxes, or that the organization that they're working with is actually withholding taxes for them. When you are an employee, your taxes are withheld by your employer, and the employer actually pays matching Social Security and Medicare taxes on your behalf. But when you are self-employed, and when we say things like independent contractor, sometimes you might hear the term self-employed, sometimes you might hear the term gig worker, essentially all means the same thing. But people who are in that category, they have to track and pay their own federal and state income tax. And in fact, any net earnings over $400, that's like an automatic 15.3% self-employment tax that person will owe. And, you know, I think sometimes you can think like, oh gosh, what is my incentive to even like file taxes when I'm making so little? But one thing to keep in mind is that that Social Security and Medicare tax piece that the 15.3% really represents, that's you showing when you file your taxes and you pay that tax, it's developing your work history for the purposes of Social Security and Medicare. So it really is a benefit if thinking about long-term financial health to file those taxes. One thing to keep in mind about taxes too is taxes are pay as you go. They must be paid throughout the year and not just at tax time. Depending on income, this, you know, if it's very low, this may not be an issue. But for young people who are engaging in regular gig work or independent contracting, this is something that you may need to look into. We did a really thorough tax webinar a couple months ago, and so we'll include the link to all that information about taxes in the follow-up from this presentation. Since we started a little late, I am going pretty fast, but just know that in the breakout rooms, there'll be a chance to ask some questions, and you can always put stuff in the Q&A as we go along so you don't forget. I did want to touch just briefly on public benefits. Almost all government benefits are connected to income. But one thing that we're hearing over and over is the difficulty of young people in their ability to prove what their freelance income is. And that is actually creating a barrier to them receiving that certain benefits that they might be entitled to, whether that's TANF, whether that's food assistance, medical assistance, et cetera. So that's something that's like to solve if you hire a young person as an employee, because a pay stub is something that everyone generally understands. But we will talk later on and in the breakout rooms about some other options and ways that people have figured out in order to track and prove their income for public benefits purposes. The other thing to know about benefits is that even small amounts of income may be reportable and may actually impact the amount of someone's public benefits, or even completely make them ineligible for them. So when you're working with young people as contractors, it's really important to keep in mind both the tax burden and the public benefits burden, and take that into account when you're setting rates and thinking through like what's actually a fair rate for this particular contractor. I'm just going to touch briefly too on like the administration of payments. This is just, it literally happened with this webinar, right? So organizations say they value youth voice, but when payment systems are slow, unclear, or rigid, it undermines that message and erodes trust and credibility. So basically, like an agreement is made to pay a youth a stipend, to develop a contract, whatever it is. But then we've got a system where someone's not paid until 45 days after they submit an invoice, or all the paperwork is submitted by the youth, but then the payment, the PayPal payment doesn't come for several weeks. Or the young person doesn't even know what to expect when it comes to payment, like when they're going to submit their hours and when they're actually going to get the payment. This is just puts young people in a position. It's traumatizing. It's creates real consequences when it comes to young people being able to keep their housing stably. It causes late payments. There is just myriad examples of where our payment systems are causing the exact kind of harm that we're saying we want to overcome. So I highly encourage everyone to think through, and if you haven't had conversations with your operational or financial staff, think through ways that you can be quicker and more responsive in your payment systems to young people. So do you have a written policy about it? That could be helpful. Do you have a variety of the types of payments that you can offer so that they're accessible to young people? Have you thought through the paperwork that's required? So like you need maybe certain paperwork, but let's not make the paperwork requirements so onerous that young people can't meet it. Make sure that you're really clear about payment options and timelines. And then also just be ready with resources for youth who need to learn about tax and public benefits obligations. And then also as an organization, plan ahead for the time and costs that it takes to actually set up an ethical and fair youth compensation system. All right, I am going to pause here and pass it on to Ricardo to talk a little bit more about business formation and some other fun stuff.
That was really fast. Katie, there was a question in the Q&A about where would a paid intern fit within these categories, and I believe that was really early on in your presentation. So I was wondering if you could address that.
Absolutely. So it really depends. Like ideally, your intern is an actual employee. That is, I think, the most normal way an intern would come on. I don't actually think it would probably fit the definition of an independent contractor to have an intern as an independent contractor. So I think, we'd have to go to sort of the individual facts of the situation, but generally an intern, I think, would be an employee.
Thanks for the question, and thanks, Katie, for passing it over. Okay. You're all seeing this, my slide, I hope. Just while it's like top of mind for me when thinking about benefits and these types of things, and disrupting benefits to folks who are receiving some type of government benefit. One of the things that the Sustainable Economies Law Center has done where I work is that we've just given folks gifts. And so here's a little resource if you want to take a look at it, explaining what is a gift and what is not, because gifts are not taxable. And so then hopefully you wouldn't put somebody's benefits in jeopardy. But anyway, I am here to talk about contracting a bit more. Because what we've heard or what I've heard in the past, and it's not only with folks who have had lived experience living on the street or being houseless, but also working with independent contractors and artists and folks, is like, what's it like like MOU? What's a contract? What does it mean to be signed? All of these things. So that's what I'm here to talk about. My name is Ricardo Nunez. I work at the Sustainable Economies Law Center, and we are based in Oakland, California, although I am calling in from Pátzcuaro, Michoacán in Mexico. So we can talk about that later if you're interested. I'm also going to be talking about legal entities. So when is that appropriate to start thinking about as far as like protecting folks and that type of thing, and when to incorporate. But when I started at the law center, I was kind of like invited to work there. And when I was invited to work at the law center, I was not an attorney, but I was invited to work there and become an attorney without going to law school, which you can still do in 4 states without going to any law school, and about another 8 in the United States by only going to 1 year of law school and doing the rest as an apprentice. And so I asked myself, like, wait a second, what do lawyers do? People I think mostly think that like attorneys go and litigate, others become politicians, but actually there's these big group of attorneys called transactional law attorneys or corporate attorneys who help people navigate agreements and create organizations and deal with taxes and everything like that. And part of the reason that we were founded the Sustainable Economies Law Center was founded was that we saw that all of these attorneys were actually greasing the wheels of an extractive economy. And so we wanted to figure out, okay, what does that look like? How are we perpetuating that, like our profession? And how can we transform that? And when we were thinking that through, it was also a question of like, wait, we work within a particular sector, the nonprofit sector. And so really
Recording
some of
in
the
progress.
contradictions that Katie was speaking to earlier about the constraints on nonprofits, and actually that it's not only just like within the nonprofit or between a funder, but it's a whole system that is forcing us to act in certain ways and disciplining us to perform like we're in hierarchical corporations kind of based on military conquest. And so what we do at the Sustainable Economies Law Center is try to think of different ways of envisioning the world, envisioning our economic relationships that support justice and equity. So economic democracy is one of the ways that we look at how we approach this work and building the pillars of a regenerative economy. So we exist to bridge the gap in legal expertise needed to transition from destructive economic systems to innovative and cooperative alternatives. And so you can check out our website. We work with tribes doing land back work. We work with immigrant folks to form worker cooperatives. We're working inside of prisons in California to form worker cooperatives, housing cooperatives, land trusts, et cetera. So if any of those things sound interesting to you, you can go to our website and check it out. But the thing that I'll be talking about is agreements. And one way that we like to think about it at the Law Center are octopus agreements. And I'll be going through a 5-part participatory process for creating those agreements. I'm also going to be talking just a little bit about intellectual property, because I think I was asked to kind of just like touch on that and let you all know what is that and kind of give some basic information. And then also what's a legal entity and when would we want to do that. And before I get into all of that stuff and kind of like information dump for the next 20 minutes, I I just wanted to let you know that law is complicated stuff, and this is not legal advice as a disclaimer. But that we do have a resource. It's called the Resilient Communities Legal Cafe. It's virtual 3 times per month at least. I think we're going to start doing 4. And anybody can sign up. It's free. You can come talk to us about like your employment law questions, if you're forming an entity, contract questions, and then the areas that we really specialize in, cooperatives, micro businesses, like food entrepreneurs, housing cooperatives, land trusts, etc. So go to our website, theselk.org, and you can sign up to one there. Okay, so octopus agreements. So I'm going to be talking about contracts, and really when thinking about contracts, like was mentioned earlier, they're supposed to be things that can be negotiated. And so it's a space for you to define your rights and your obligations and what you're committing to. But when they're contracts, they become legally binding agreements that you can use the power or monopoly of violence by the state to enforce, or we can actually transform the way that we are creating them and the way that we use them and think about them as tools to create equitable, inclusive, and democratic spaces for collaboration. We also know that they can be jargon-laden documents that give power to only a few people who understand them, like lawyers. And so part of what I'm going to be talking about is how we can create participatory agreements that democratize knowledge and integrate learnings from the natural world and develop an iterative process for evolving relationships. So an octopus agreement is a way to think about contracts and memorandum of understanding and agreements as transformative rather than annoying and oppressive. And we're going to use the analogy of an octopus with fun cartoons to explain a little bit of a different way to think about agreements in a more relational way. So the assumptions that we're coming in with are that conventional contracts are usually super rigid, jargony, they have really sharp boundaries. Usually it's just about competition. Almost our entire legal system is based off of an adversarial legal system. And so their assumption there is that each of the parties are just trying to get everything that they can. And that each party is going to actively try to abuse its power at the expense of the other party. And so the way that we're trying to reframe this is in a more expansive way of what agreements can be. We're trying to create agreements that have more gray areas, that blur the boundaries. And I think the most important reframe is the idea that agreements are allowed to change over time and adapt to different situations. To continue a little bit more with this analogy of an octopus, we are all like arms of an octopus, because each arm of an octopus actually has its own nervous system and sensors and can make decisions on its own. It's pretty wild, based on its own unique environment. And so like us, we are all responding to our own unique environment, and we all have a specific context to our lives that we're dealing with. If we are all octopus arms, all reacting to our environments with the ability to make our own decisions, then we can come together to form a contract or an agreement, and we are ourselves turning into a thing like an octopus. So the skin of the octopus is sort of like the relational boundaries and the values and the visions of the agreement that is keeping us all together. So we're all different arms, but we're all working together to become one silly, goofy octopus together. And if we can agree to see each other as a single organism that's aligned in values and purpose, then we can become invested in repairing and healing together. So for the organism to be okay and healthy, we need to make sure that the individuals who make up that organism are being taken care of. So when I think of the role that many contracts have played in history, and like was mentioned by Katie earlier, it's pretty easy to think of contracts where the power imbalance caused an immense amount of pain and suffering and exploitation. And so thinking about contracts as something that can unify us, that can actually help us take care of each other and can get us to operate as a single organism that is aligned and invested in the individuals that make up that organism is bold, it's different, and it requires a little bit of work. So if that all sounds great, what does it actually mean to take care of each other using like a contract as a tool to be able to do that? What would it look like to have repair and healing baked into our contracts? creating contracts that take into account everyone's well-being is not a charity approach or something we should just do because it sounds catchy. It is, in fact, a very strategic approach of drafting contracts. It helps ensure that we have the greatest collective strength and agility. So approaching our work with a nourish and repair mindset is what will help make the work itself the strongest it can be. Because we're all humans, and going into these contracts, that means that we're dynamic, we're shifting, we carry with us our past experiences, and we have different ways of understanding the world. And we make mistakes. And so we can learn and grow and change as time passes and as we experience new things. So we need our contracts to reflect that human experience, and contracts that can be adaptive and not static. And so in order to repair, as we move through these things, we need to be able to adapt as needed. So the purpose of the contract won't change. The people are coming together, you're coming together to complete a project that you're uniquely positioned to complete, and that's not going to change. But the specific steps of the way we take to achieve that goal might change. And so when change is necessary, we want our contracts to be able to adapt to that without needing to throw out the entire contract and start from scratch. And so we can write tools directly into our contracts that will help us adapt as needed. And so one way of doing this, as was I think briefly mentioned earlier, is by writing shorter and simpler contracts. That means less rules where possible. So it's important to note that in order for repair and adaptation to work within your contract, all parties involved need to agree to communicate their needs and to adapt to the needs of others. So when everyone agrees to communicate and adapting, then simpler and shorter contracts can create stronger bonds and more adaptive groups. So like an octopus, we survive and thrive by continually learning and sensing into and adapting to our shifting environment. And so as an organism composed of many organisms, our most powerful learnings may be about each other. And so as we learn the nuances of one another's unique experiences and habits and needs, we can refine our practices together. So these contracts don't need to be just something for you to be able to receive the funding that you're working on or the money that you're being granted. They don't need to be stiff documents that get people in trouble for not completing some portion of work. They can really be tools that work for you. So we've put together a guide of how to create these living documents. And so as I move through this, I think the slides were already shared. This is kind of an agenda of a way to actually move through conversations of developing a contract. And it might be a little too in-depth for something like really short, like a very short independent contractor agreement. But the longer that these agreements are meant to last and the more complex, then this can helpfully be a guide to help you all create contracts that are meaningful and that are based on the learnings that we have from our lives and the world and the learnings from the natural world, including our cephalopod friends. So maybe you're thinking that this is just a presentation about process, but that's wrong. This can actually be a template for your future agreement. At the Sustainable Economies Law Center, we've created contracts, operating agreements, bylaws using literally Google Slides with cartoons in them. We've submitted and it's been accepted by the Securities and Exchange Commission a slide deck with cartoons to get an exemption to be able to allow one of our housing cooperatives to receive national investments. And so documents don't need to look like this. They're usually contracts drafted by attorneys with a bunch of legalese. And so part of what we hope is that you're able to create contracts with less legalese that's accessible to the people, that creates equity as part of the base of the creation of the contract. So here's the process that we're going to be going through that will hopefully allow the collaboratives that you all create or that you all participate in and the creation of agreements to be meaningful and that meets the needs of the group. So in this case, I'm going to be going through these steps of uniting, attuning, nourishing, learning, and adapting. So although agreements can contain traditional aspects of a contract, in uniting, we're focusing on laying down the foundation before those aspects are discussed. We're deciding here, this first step, that we're all human and that things come up in our lives, and that's okay. And we're agreeing that we care about the well-being of each other first. And so focusing on the relationship building elements that include a shared vision and shared guiding principles to keep the parties' expectations and interests aligned is important. It's laying the foundation for creating an environment of trust and openness. The goal here is to establish mutual goals designed to foster trust and collaboration. So we're coming together to unite around these values, these guiding principles, and these mutual goals. So here's some questions that can help shape that conversation to shift from a thinking of agreements as both parties just looking out for themselves to how can we actually take care of each other. The second step is attuning. So once you've created your foundation of a shared vision and mutual goals, it's time to get specific to what is going on in our lives that could affect this agreement. Here we look at our own circumstances and context that might affect the agreement so that a one-size-fits-all agreement that we're all used to is not adequate and does not actually take into account the complexities of being a human. Just as a disclaimer about this part is that this is not a common approach for creating agreements. This is an acknowledgement of your life circumstances, including social and economic circumstances that might feel vulnerable and like a big risk. So it might feel hard at first, and it can feel hard through the process sometimes too, but it's a place where we can continue to grow. So here are some questions to help each other and ourselves, like figure out how do we attune? What should we know about each other? What's our capacity? Both parties should reflect on what their capacity is and what they can give and what they need to receive. This might change over time, and that's okay, because this agreement isn't stagnant and it can change as things come up. I'm gonna just move a little fast because I know I have a short amount of time to get through all this content, but these slides are all here for y'all to use and reproduce and modify. So the next step is to nourish. This is the part where if you haven't, you begin writing the commitments down to each other. And then an important piece of this is to allow it to adapt and change. I just want to say that the most important thing of a contract is whether the people signing it actually understand it. What do the parties need to know to roll with each other, especially when things go south? So as you go through this process, I just want to suggest that you keep in mind, short and sweet is best. If you can hand it to a sixth grader and they can explain the gig or the agreement between the two people, it's good. And finally, lawyers usually just make things more complicated. So try to do this between the parties at the beginning before you have an attorney review it. Here's a list of hot topic items when creating a contract. While you're making your agreement, you can use this as a place to reference whether your agreement has covered these topics, even if it's just knowing that there's a role that is meant to bottom line one of these activities. And in the notes of this slide deck, there's the list is longer, so you can check it out there too. The next step in our process is to learn. So here we make a commitment to continue learning by identifying specific learning goals, resources, and plans. To eventually inhabit a transformed world, we must carefully study the patterns that keep us oppressed and the pathways to liberation. So our social issues are dynamic, they're changing, and our contracts need to be able to make space. Learning can happen in many different ways. It can include political education or practical skill building, personal development, ongoing learning about the context we inhabit, deepening learning about each other, and more. So here's just some questions to ask ourselves. How are we prioritizing learning from each of the parties can this happen? What are the rhythms that the agreement to allow for this learning to happen? Because it's not a one-way street. The learning happens both ways. What skills developed? So for this project, but then that we can take away. So, and then the final step is adapt. The last conversation that we suggest having is to think about what is important for everyone as far as adapting. We agree that our contracts should be dynamic and allow for change to happen when it's needed. So this could be because someone involved in the project made a major life change happen to them and no longer complete the task assigned to them in the time frame that was agreed to. It could be that new school skills were developed or new information was learned and the project would benefit from some changes. There can be tensions that arise between people working on the project and their ability to perform their duties. So given that, we can agree that a tuning and learning will happen throughout the course of the project, and we should talk about how those things can actually be adapted when needed. And so here are some questions to just help that conversation move forward. How do we want to commit to adapting? What tools would be useful? So having an idea of how conflict will be resolved if it arises is really helpful. You can write in routine check-ins where specific questions will be asked and where there's a commitment to figuring out how adaptation will happen. You incorporate rituals. So are there specific rituals that speak to folks and help adaptation happen more easily? How will you incorporate joy and fun into this work so it doesn't feel heavy all the time? Lastly, how do we want these conversations to feel? And what do we need to ensure that happens? So whatever tools you choose to include, it's important to talk about how we want these conversations to feel when we're in them. So maybe it's a specific mindset that's helpful, an opening ritual, list of check-in questions. It can really be anything that helps people feel seen and feel heard. And so that's one way we can transform the way that we're working together and create a living document based on the learnings of our natural world. Okay, so that was a lot. I'm going to try to get to the next two topics as quickly as possible. The next is intellectual property. It's a huge, complex topic that we definitely do not have enough time to adequately cover. It's a whole presentation on its own. But because of that, we've created a bunch of resources on our website about intellectual property law. It's mostly focused on on artists on our website, but it's really applicable to anybody who's an independent contractor who wants to understand a bit more how to protect their own intellectual property. So what I'm going to do here, though, really quickly, is just to flag some topics for conversation between you, the independent contractor, and partner organizations to think about and talk through. Really, you can think of intellectual property as anything generated by your brain that is non-material. So that's a really short, not super precise definition, but intangible objects that are of your creation, you can think of as intellectual property. So it's important to explicitly define who will own the creative content produced during the project. There's certain legal defaults, such as the work for hire doctrine, which often presumes that if a worker creates content while employed by an organization, that the organization owns the IP. So that's an example of a legal default that you may want to opt out of. And so you can explicitly say that in your contract, that the independent contractor owns all the creative content, or it's shared in some way, or it's licensed under a Creative Commons, for example, license to allow people to use it and share it and reproduce it for particular purposes. It's also important to specifically spell out the language that the artist would like to use in credit language and in which context they would like to be credited, like websites and press releases. There's lots of organizations that have photos of their contractors or partners without even listing their names. And then, do you want the right to review a press release before it goes out? So these are things that you can talk about as you're deciding how to protect the intellectual property that you create. Okay, so that's like a tiny little bit of intellectual property. If I'm gonna start going in legal entities, somebody can drop in like time for me. Oh yeah, Kit, where are you gonna go? Okay.
I'm gonna say maybe like 2 minutes on legal entities, 2 to 3 minutes, and then we'll go to our breakouts, and there'll be some time for people to ask some questions there too.
Awesome. Okay. I'm gonna go 2 minutes on legal entities. So what are legal entities? Why do we form them? What does it mean to be limited liability? And what are some common types of legal entities? I'm not going to get to all of this because I only have a minute and a half now. One piece of context is that legal entities are distinct in every state. So most states have something that like approximates a liability company, some type of corporation, etc. They have them, but they're just a little bit different in states. You're going to want to know that and check your own state when deciding if you should incorporate and into which legal entity. And that's a great place. The Resilient Communities Legal Cafe is a great place to come and talk about that kind of stuff. Even if you're outside of California, where we're licensed to practice law, we can give legal information to anyone around the country. So when a client comes to us selling something like this, it's hard to untangle it. And so one of the things that often complicates discussions about choosing the appropriate legal entity is that people confuse tax status with entity types, with all the stuff that should go into like internal policies in a document of a business or cooperative, which I specialize in. So it can be confusing. And so what we like to do is think about entities as cakes. And so the cake of this cake is the legal entity and the icing is the tax status. So an entity is something that you form according to a state statute. And tax category is a variety of icing you can elect at the federal level, usually to achieve some type of like particular tax benefit. And so you can mix and match cake and icing as you wish. And so when people come to us with these types of questions, it's like a smashed up piece of cake. So what is a legal entity? It's a structure under which a structure and rules under which a business operates. An entity helps determine things like how a business is governed, how liability is allocated, and how a business is taxed. Some common examples of legal entities are general stock corporations, cooperative corporations, and LLCs. I'm just gonna do a couple slides to finish. So let's start off with the basics of legal entities. And if let's say I want to start selling goods or services, baking and selling cakes for money, then by operation of law, I am instantly become a sole proprietor. So just like magic. And so you are your own business. And even if you don't lift a finger to be considered a business entity in the state and the courts are going to consider you a business, right? What if you come together with a friend? I want to come together with a friend to start a business, and we start operating and selling our cakes. Well, we have created a partnership. So when you do this, the state is going to view you as a business and treat you as such. So a partnership agreement in this context is really useful to make sure that you and your partner are on the same page about how you work together and make decisions. You can get a separate tax ID for your partnership and file tax returns, etc. But then we get to the issue of sole proprietors and partnerships and what's the liability that you're going to be encountering, what's the tax treatment, and how is that maintaining your mission and formation. Your liability is unlimited. People can come after your personal assets. You can be sued, like your personal assets and the business's assets. But if you don't incorporate, you don't have to pay a minimum franchise tax to the state, and the taxation is easier. And then you avoid these like corporate formalities and things. So understanding your liability is really important. So how risky are your business activities? Are you going to be serving food? Are customers going to be coming onto your property? Will you have employees? Or will you be mostly in front of your computer until your eyeballs fall out? So if you don't need like a high level of liability protection, if you're not worried that people are going to sue you because they're like eating a product of yours or something like that, the risk is low. A lot of times it's just better to not form a legal entity. Depending on the product or services, sometimes there's licensure requirements in your state to provide those types of services and products. So in California, at least, there's a thing called calgold.ca.gov, which really does a good job of laying out if you're going to start in a particular industry, what are the things that you should be thinking about as far as licensing and liability and insurance and those types of things. Okay, I'm going to stop for now. You all have these slides with some notes, and then yeah, we can do breakout rooms and keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. You're getting so much praise and excitement in the chat. So don't be surprised if you don't hear from us soon to do more of this work, because I think Phoebe was absolutely right. Let me just see what their chat was, because I think it was so on the head. This is already looking like it's so usable beyond independent contracting. This would be a really cool outline for the partnership agreement my YAB needs to make with our host organization, even though we're per diem employees. And so I think this is just really empowering information and gives the app and people choice. They can say yes or no to things. And I always say that I know is just as powerful as a yes when you're making decisions. So because of our so we're going to transition to the breakout rooms, but because of our initial technology issue in the beginning, it reset all of our settings. And so breakout rooms are not reachable to us right now. So what we are going to do is we are going to still have breakout rooms, but youth and or those people with lived expertise are going to stay here. So you're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to select, any buttons. Community supporters are go to another Zoom room with me and Jack. And so just posted that into the chat. So again, youth and those with lived expertise are going to stay here with Maria's competent hands, and community supporters and allies will go to the Zoom link that is in the chat right now. And we are going to do the breakout. And then if there's time at the end, you'll come back to this, well, the community supporters will come back to this Zoom room using your initial link. So, but we'll figure all of that out. Katie, feel free to text me, decisions and stuff like that with how to navigate that. So with that, I'm gonna leave because I have to host the next thing. But we'll see all of you.
Awesome. And if we don't end up having time to come back, we will make sure that everything gets sent out, sort of a follow-up email with all the resources. So community supporters, head on to the other Zoom, and folks who are going to stay here, stay here.
Katie, would you like to stop recording for this section? I don't know if you care one way or the other. Yes, stop
I think we'll
recording.
stop recording. We're going to have a
Okay.
note taker though. Diamond is here to take notes. And I'm going to head over to the other
Recording
session to take notes for
stopped.
that. Bye, all. See you soon.
Bye. Just gonna give it a couple extra seconds to make sure folks have time to transition over. That was amazing. Oh my gosh.
Thanks.
I learned so much. I can imagine many of us did. And I'm excited to see what came up for folks. Awesome.
Are we able to see other people's?
I don't believe so, because I think we're still in webinar format. So I was actually trying to figure that out on my end, and I don't think we
Do
can.
you have other people turn on their screen?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I guess so. We can kind of just jump into it. I think folks may have had ample time. So please feel free to come on screen. It's better for you to be in the chat, that's welcomed as well. But I believe we can view like individually and maybe be able to see y'all. Let me see. Nope, I don't think so. Kayla, is there another way?
I'm looking now. Thank you all so much, by the way, for your patience. Zoom has been having some technical issues lately.
Totally understand. And also, this was my first time being in like the backstage format, all of that. So super cool. But yes, still feel free, if y'all can see each other, feel free to, again, like on camera, whatever feels in alignment with you. I'll just briefly introduce myself. I did have slides, but I honestly think it would be best for us to kind of just be like more conversational. If folks would like a slide, I can present it. Feel free to hop in the chat with your preference. But my name is Maria Aoki Chavez, and I hold a lot of different roles, but I think what's most important to me in embodying who I am is like why I'm here, why I'm in this work. And so that's really fostered in my lived expertise, specifically in foster care and other systems as well. And so that led me into consulting at a very young, vulnerable age of 19. It's been several years since then, but eventually throughout that journey, I experienced we discussed in today's presentation, a lot of those injustices that directly affected my livelihood. And I can imagine there might be some resonance with the folks here as well. Oh, oh, awesome. Yay.
Are you
Okay.
back on? Not sure if you guys can turn your camera on, but you should definitely be able to take yourself off mute.
I'll just wait for folks. I think it's filtering everyone. Hello, hello. Diamond.
Hi, good on my end.
Awesome. Oh, I'm loving to see this. Wonderful. So I'm not sure if folks were able to get my introduction. Can I just get like a quick round of like thumbs up? Okay. I don't see I don't see too many. Okay, so all right, so I'll kind of just like briefly transition out of that. So again, just leading with my lived expertise, that brought me into consultancy. And so a lot of this, what we talked about today, resonated with my own personal experience as well. But also in terms of like where I'm at now in my leadership journey, really about like the relational and human pieces of this, which I think is what Ricardo, to your points, I think that's kind of what we're trying to transition to as a collective as well. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I don't know if you want to do like a deeper introduction, Ricardo, but feel free if you'd like to, and then we'll kind of throw it over to folks to introduce themselves if they'd like.
Sure. Yeah. I'm originally from Long Beach in Southern California. I lived in the Bay Area for about 12 years, working with the Sustainable Economies Law Center, and moved to Pátzcuaro, Michoacán, in Mexico to do some ancestor work and somebody fell in love. And now I'm here until we get a visa for my partner and her kid. Yeah, so that's a little bit about me, and I'm very passionate about democratic workplaces and collaboratives that are building working class power. So, yeah, infused with all the stuff, indigeneity and decolonization and healing and compassion. So, a little bit more about me. So, thanks y'all for showing up. I'm interested to hear what you're curious.
Yes, the ancestors were with you. They were very much with you. And yeah, I love to see kind of like feel free to again unmute, come on camera, or hop in the chat. Just like introduce yourself in any way that feels right for you. And then if you have any questions, we also have time. Beverly. Oh, I know you unmute Diamond. Gotcha.
Yeah, Ricardo, I have a question for you. I popped this in the Q&A. What do you do in circumstances where you have a written as one thing around intellectual property, and then you have a sort of verbal contract coming from the people that you're working with that is in opposition to what's written? How do you navigate that?
I would, wow. Okay. Yeah, I would try to, I mean, for you, just like see which of the contracts is gonna, like, what do you want from both of those contracts, and then have a conversation how to get the things that are not written into the written contract. Um, one of the things when like employment law and these things were mentioned earlier, like the state isn't going in and like checking all of these things. The way that the state finds out about like employment law violations or contracts not being in sync or the people not agreeing to them is that like people bring them to what was it? Bring them to court and sue them. So nobody's checking these things. So really just like working together to stay out of that process unless it's necessary is pretty useful, or a place where I would start. So just like really trying to figure out why aren't the things that are being said to you in the written contract, and how do we get them into the written contract? Because if at some point you needed to go to court, they're going to be like, well, it's written here. And like what you said in person is like just, not, it's harder to prove. And so, I don't know, does that help a little bit?
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Did somebody say they were like calling in from Cuba?
That's me.
Oh,
Nunez is also my last name. But my ancestors through Cuba.
okay. I went there to participate in the conference and met a bunch of folks and who worked at different cooperatives there, and Solidarity Economy Enterprises. It was pretty amazing. So yeah.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. My name's Callie Junkins, and I'm a member of the YAB and from Aroostook County, and I go to the University of Southern Maine for psychology and criminology.
It's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for joining us. I used to live in Connecticut, so I've gotten a good sense of Maine. Awesome. Anyone else? Anyone else feeling called to introduce themselves?
I can introduce myself. And I want to say thank you so much. Like, this information is so powerful, and I'm definitely taking it back to the leadership in my organization and the contracts that we have to just say, like, this is, what's becoming the standard, and like we need to get up there. It is really hard though. And a lot of the stuff you said, like, I'm a lived expert, and I was like, yes, I want that so much. But then also seeing it from the grant side and the contracting side, like there's so many different things that are at play. But I'm Tori Schuler. I'm the direct advocacy at Fostering Ideas. I lived expertise in Colorado. My organization is headquartered in South Carolina. And I have a international organization and we have a Facebook group. It's called Speak Up Voices from Foster Care, and it's a platform for people to be able to speak their truth, ask questions, start conversations. And so actually posted a question on the page at the beginning of the conference, of the training today, that was like, how have you been paid or not? I know in most situations, especially before I got into my professional capacity where my organization pays me, a lot of times it was not. And my call to the mission and my call to support, what's happening made me feel like I had to compromise. And so I loved what you guys said, but I'd love to hear some more tips or tricks about like standing up for yourself and like holding really firm in those contract negotiations, particularly around the intellectual property and the fair compensation, not only for like myself, but also for the young people that are coming in to do things like panels or focus groups and things like that, that a lot of times we're doing for volunteering. And I would love for that to be not the standard and for compensation to be the standard. And also, I just want to share that we made a shift to stop using the word incentive and instead use the word acknowledgement when we're writing a small moments or gift cards, things like that for participation. We're acknowledging their time and expertise with a gift. And then, of course, anytime we can bring youth into contracts and when we're building youth boards and stuff like that, talking about it's not sustainable for you to have this if you're not also supporting the youth for their time financially. And South Carolina is doing a really great job. They're paying their youth engagement advocates. Or it's called Yay. We helped contract with them in South Carolina. And so the youth are paid for their time. And they're doing that themselves now with a couple different contractors so they can get more throughout the state. And I know the youth are still being paid for their time and expertise. And here in Colorado, the state, when they're bringing youth in, they're paying $75 an hour. And having done hours and hours and hours for free for them, like to see that and to see my young people be able to, get paid for their expertise has been really fulfilling. And I know so much advocacy and so many people like you guys speaking up and, keep pushing this is why we're able to make those changes. And I'm excited to be able to use like this webinar, but also like your expertise here to say like, this is what the standard is and this is what's ethical, and we really have to be right.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Helen Renfrew, she, her pronouns. I am the Director of Programs for the Alaska Coalition on Housing and Homelessness. And we were recently, last June, we were awarded a youth homeless systems improvement grant from HUD. So, and the largest line item by far that we put into our grant was for youth compensation. And after doing a really deep dive into some actual experiences by youth that were involved in the Youth Homeless Demonstration Project applications and the realities of contracting, we have decided that youth engaged in all statewide youth action board and are going to be employees. So that basically means that we're an organization of 8, 3 of whom are paid through the SC grant, and we're going to be taking probably a third casual hourly employees located throughout the entire state of Alaska. They're non-benefited positions because most of the folks already have mainstream benefits. But we've actually reached out to someone who volunteers to do tax preparation, to do a webinar or trainings for our Youth Action Board members. And we've also reached out to the Department of Public Assistance to do a training for folks who come in to provide their input on how to improve the youth homeless system around Alaska so that because each person has their own unique situation, going to make sure that they're covered, that they're taken care of. And that we're not, if that means we need to adjust the number for us or the amount that we pay them, we will be taking out taxes, so they'll get pay stubs. We also, starting July 1st, Alaska has instituted a mandatory sick leave law. Well, it's not, it passed the ballot measure. It's being instituted. Nothing's actually written yet. So we're, punting basically. But we're just on the phone with our accounting firm yesterday, figuring out how we're going to manage the policy for sick time for casual employees. So yeah, I've been researching it probably since last November. We made the determination about 3 months ago. Now we're just waiting for the final P&Ps to get through all of the different regional youth action boards that want to have input before we put them out there. And then by the end of July, we will have hired youth from all across Alaska. The problem the challenge that we've had is there's a couple challenges, and I think this is just working with youth. One is young people with lived experience who are potentially going through instability as they're doing the work, and making sure that they understand that their compensation as a youth board member is not meant to be their primary income. And also that youth who are actively navigating crisis, it's unfair for us to expect them to work. But it's also not a time when they should be focusing on doing work on youth homelessness. They should be focusing on figuring out what's going on. And what I mean by active crisis is that there are those who are actively going through an eviction, or they have been arrested for assault, or they, so trying to figure out how to manage those. And I don't know that this is the forum for that, but that's just one of the problems we're having. The other is the fact that we're actually, because it's YESI and it's HUD grant funded, we're actually requiring them to have deliverables. So, like, if they're doing the work as employees of the organization, they are expected to do the work that they are assigned and not just get paid for hanging out at the mall to talk to people if it's not an actual, like, approved event. And so I find myself as a Gen X person often being in conflict with our youth, not like angry conflict, but like my expectations for production are capitalistic, right? And a part of my generation. So does anyone have any recommendations on that particular piece of tension?
Yeah. That's very challenging. I don't know, Maria, you want to start?
I have the experience, like, again, from that lived experience, and then kind of like within the past couple of years. I think Ricardo would be really helpful for maybe like more of like in terms of like thinking in the broader systemic context. But I definitely, first of all, just want to say thank you for your transparency and vulnerability there, and saying, just like naming that exists, and that's what you're trying to like figure out. And I like have so much respect for that. And also just like respect for the work that you guys are doing. This is the first time, I'm pretty sure, in the youth compensation group, like I believe that your organization was like the model. We're like, oh my gosh, like this. So just want to give you your flowers. And I think in terms of like that, like production piece and like just like the evolution that is now, I mean, I have younger siblings. I'm an eldest sister, and my 12-year-old brother like does not, it's completely different. So I do get it in that sense. And I would say, I think particularly to when like we're experiencing, or like young people or lived efforts are actively, it's like a lot of folks say like lived experience, but a lot of times it's like living experience that you named. And I think it's like just all ands, and I don't know necessarily if I'm like how to hold that systematically, but I think it's like we're experiencing or be experiencing harm or experience homeless, experiencing actively, and then also still wanting to have passion. Like a lot of us are coming in this as like hard workers. We're still experiencing this. We're also wanting to make a change for those like before us, or those before and after us. And so I think like what I heard in there is like the kind of like honoring of that. And I think as someone who was experiencing those things in consulting work, I feel like the best thing, honestly, is like that relationship, like that conflict. I think a lot of times can be generative. And so I was like really excited that you named that. And I think it's about like building those relationships and understanding like each other as humans, and like understanding their lived expertise. Again, programmatically, I could shift into that mind as well, but I really want to like space being like youth and young adult lived expertise. And so I would invite like my peers to also jump in here and give their thoughts as well. But I think you guys already have the model. If I'm like, it sounds like you already are relational. You already are like really trying to embrace youth leadership. And so, yeah, that's maybe like an answer question to a question, blurred answer. But yeah, feel free to jump in, Ricardo or anyone else.
Yeah, I think what was it? Maybe just like building off of the like presentation portion, it's just like creating those rhythms, like check-ins, like trying to continue to come in alignment. And then there's like, I don't know the specific details of your situation, but like if the purpose of the like employment relationship is to like give this person skills or to like produce a productive thing or both, and like then which one, how do we balance the those like outcomes that we're wanting? And yeah, there's something, yeah, I totally hear the capitalist mind. Like we are constantly trying to like figure that out at our organization. And like how much of this is our sort of like indoctrination into the systems that we don't want to continue perpetuating, like kind of making us frustrated and angry because they're not being productive, in the way that we want them to be. So, versus how are we transforming the relationships that we have with each other and then hopefully out into the system. And that's part of the reason that I appreciate having this like nonprofit industrial complex framing, is that like actually all of this money that we're getting from foundations, or a lot of our organizations from foundations, those are all like tax shelters for wealthy people that should have gone into being taxed and then like coming back to us in some type of government services and support. And so it's like if we can have that, when I orient that way to the foundation money that we get, then it's a little bit easier for me to kind of let go of the expect, like, oh, we need to use this money to do this particular thing. And this was already our money in the first place. It was extracted from our communities. And so, like, do I want to continue working with this person? They're not doing the thing that said they were willing to do, the commitment they made, like maybe not, but then it's easier for me to remove a little bit of that tension from myself, and just be like, okay, this isn't the right fit for you after, moving through multiple conversations with the person and that type of thing. So that's my hot take answer. I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
It does. It does. I mean, this is all HUD funding, and so there's obviously we have to be able to show that we've done the things. Not to mention we have a lot of things that need to be done in this state, and I think that the other side of it is that we're focused on the skill building and the resume, like adding things to the resume so that as these youth are aging up, we've helped them with the professional development side, take the classes, get the certifications, do the, preside in meetings, come up with documents so that they feel comfortable going out into the employment world, after or during their youth action board time. So yeah, we're trying to focus on not just what we get, but also what do you get, and yet at the same time know that I have a HUD report I'm gonna have to do. And right now there's absolutely no guidance on it because, HUD's doing their thing.
Oh my God. Thank you for that. For like, yeah, I worked for a while doing homeless housing and eviction prevention, and that HUD money was very frustrating, and the reporting and the, like having to front the money and then get paid back by the government, but then like having delayed payments, and oh my God. Okay. I hope you got some like meditation practices or something to help you
we're just saying the work hasn't stopped. Like the work hasn't stopped. We still have to do the things. So we will just continue to do the things. And then, they'll do what they're going to do over there. And hopefully this is the arc of the pendulum shift and it'll come back. But yeah, right now it's just what it is.
I'd also like to say, Helen, or anyone else who's interested. So NN4Y, a big part of what we do is focused on federal policy. So like RHYA grants, YESC, all that kind of stuff. I'm going to put in a chat a blog post we just did about what's kind of going on with these fundings, but feel free to like poke around and reach out with any questions. We love talking about the like key policy stuff.
Actually, I think I that tab open on my browser.
Even better.
Yeah.
Gina, I think I saw you unmute. I do want to acknowledge and just honor it is at time, but we're happy to stay on, and the link I believe is set, or the meeting is so for additional.
Yeah, stay on as long as you like.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be really succinct. But thank you from I'm raised in Washington State. I've been doing this consultation work for years, and it wasn't until I was almost 30 that I realized lived expertise could be an income revenue source, and this was after I spent 4 to 6 years going to college to be taken seriously for my lived expertise. So I really appreciate the partnership here and the movement that's building. I think the one thing that's really stood out to me was, Ricardo, your comments about just like how these resources were extracted from our systems. And so when we take those monies from the nonprofit to reinvest back into the communities that were stolen from, there was a grant opportunity that I was really excited about that was lived expertise led. And the barrier for my application was that I did not belong to a nonprofit. And the issue that me and the co-consultant were going to push forward to this funder, because it's a huge funding opportunity, was a lot of these nonprofits that have to go under as a fiscal sponsor pursuing the harm to the system that are now supposed to be getting money served people harmed by systems. So the other thing that got me was I saw a great article by a funder recently saying we don't need more nonprofits. So for me to go out and create another nonprofit to be a part of the system to get the money from the systems that took from us, it's this conundrum that's come up this year that I find fascinating. So thank you for helping us navigate the realities of the expertise and the advocacy while also designing a different and better system.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually was just speaking to our other presenter, Jack, as well. And we're just like talking about this yesterday and how they were looking for and I don't think they'll mind that I'm sharing this, but they were looking for a grant and like trying to apply. And it was the same thing. They weren't a nonprofit. They need fiscal sponsorship. And I think that sparked something for me, which is like, as lived experts who are building out our consultancy, like, how do we do that if we, again, like to your point, are like in all these different systems that are designed to be the way that they like function, the way that they function. And so hopefully at another point, and some of the resources that we have in this presentation can help folks that are starting their consultancy, lived experts in this call, who are looking to navigate, like, how do I get that funding to support my business, to support my initiatives? Again, for the sake of time, I don't know if that's best right now, but thank you for naming that. And hopefully that kind of sparks thoughts for others.
Everybody.
I just dropped a couple resources into the chat, or 2 links. The first one is a mutual aid toolkit. So it's talking about, it was coming out of, or during the pandemic, and all of these mutual aid groups were forming, and then they were trying to receive money. And so like they had questions around fiscal sponsorship or what to do, who to hold that money, how, these types of things. So that might be a useful resource. And the second is, if you need to get into a fiscal sponsorship relationship, how do you like move into that in an equitable, these types of things. What was it? And we have been doing work with foundations to convince the attorneys and the boards at foundations to basically give directly to individuals and not have to go through a nonprofit or fiscal sponsorship. So, and that information's on our website under wealth redistribution. So I can find that really quick in the chat too. So.
Thank you. And I'm compiling all these links that we shared in the breakout session so they can be sent out.
And I was going to say the same thing that Diamond just did, that as a nonprofit, you can fundraise unless you have an agreement to not compete for fundraising with another organization.
Since we're under the city of Springfield, the city like doesn't allow us to, or something. There, I don't know exactly what it is. I just know we're not allowed to fundraise wherever like our funding comes from, like state and federal. I don't know exactly the specifics. But we are not allowed to fundraise. We have been told that multiple times. Unfortunately, that's the case for us.
That's a bummer. Sorry about that.
We are we're paid by the city. but they don't do direct deposit. They're not allowed to because we're considered contracted independent contractors. So like texts are not taken out. And it's frustrating because I owe money. I used to be contracted with my other job with state work. Then they moved me to an employee last year so that I can try to get texts taken out. The only problem is I didn't know that because my checks are under $600 each, federal is not withheld. So I owe for that. I started taking out $35 from each paycheck starting this spring. I didn't realize until already partway into this year that taxes were not being taken out. This was never explained to me that your check has to be above $600 to have federal taken out. So it's not common knowledge. They don't teach that. Even the tax, we did a presentation on taxes for youth that we work with, and that wasn't even mentioned. I don't think that was even mentioned there. So I owe what I don't know, like between I finished paying off 2022 in May this year, but I still owe like I don't know, like $1,300 between 2023 and 2024 between my two jobs. And I'm on low income. I get disability through Social Security. I get $771 a month. It's a joke. They expect you to be on other benefits. I'm going to be very transparent. My friend gets 1501. But see, my dad was a farmer most of his life. I'm under my dad. I'm not old enough. I don't have enough work credits, whatever, to claim under myself. Because my dad worked as a farmer, he got low pay. He's disabled since I was a kid. So, my dad probably had a better paying job, worked more years, had more credits. My friend gets more than I do. So I have to supplement my income with part-time work, but I have mental and physical disabilities. I couldn't work a full-time job, and there's like, I don't know how the heck to save money because I don't get enough to save enough. Like, I mean, so I could save some if I didn't spend money on like, there's the Pokemon Go on my phone. I'd spend money on that, probably like $120 a month, but I could save that money. I could save money for other recreational stuff I do, but I don't eat out too much. I don't really go out and do a lot of activities, so I save money there, but there's other stuff, it's just like difficult when they don't prepare you to like take care of this stuff. I didn't know anything about paying estimated taxes. I never figured that out. And I can't pay estimated taxes right now because I'm trying to pay off my taxes that I owe for the past 2 years. So it's frustrating. I have a payment plan for $50 a month, but all the interest that's going to accrue until I pay it off is going to be very difficult. I took out a lease one time to help a friend with car work a couple of years ago, and it was an 18-month lease, did not affect credit. You're paying, well, let's say, okay, the original, if I just had the money in the first place with me and my friend, it would have been $1,300 approximately. I paid almost 3 times that by the end of the 18 months. The interest is ridiculous. And my friend needs help with another car. Now he has a different car. He needs help with it. He's struggling still. And I am not taking out a lease. I'm going to help him. He's going to put like half the money towards it. I'm going to put half the money towards it. We are going to do the work ourselves, just buy the parts, because labor costs are too expensive to have a car. The people repair the car. So, and I have half a degree for automotive that I never got to finish, and didn't make sense to finish it even if I could at this point in my life. But I'm thankfully able to continue this work, stay in this field, because I didn't know what else I was going to do until actually yesterday and today I was in some workshops, and I met another community partner that could possibly get me employed at their organization, starting with volunteer work. And then to do that, because my contract for the state work, we're off for the summer from July to September, but then my contract ends at the end of November. That's 35 an hour. And then the other one for the city is 20 an hour with my YAB. And that ends the end of next fiscal year, the end of next June. I can do one more year. So I am just all over the place trying to do stuff. I live alone, it's difficult. But thankfully I've built all these connections. If I don't know what to do, I don't know who to go to. I just ask somebody at my job, like, hey, they'll reach out, like, you know somebody? And they're like, yeah, you know, I have all the connections, thankfully. Otherwise, I don't know what I would do because they don't teach all these things in school, and they should. That should be the main focus, not all this other stuff. In Massachusetts, they have the MCAS test, which is more like a test to see all the teachers taught you, see how well you retain the information. But like, they should be testing the teacher, not the students, causing more stress. It's unnecessary. I feel like it's very unnecessary. Some of the state tests that they do for kids in school, it's just too much. Like, let a kid be a kid, teach them life skills, and let them be a kid while they're a
Yeah.
kid. Because adulting is hard, and this world we live in is very stressful. And you know, if you don't have, you know, a loving family,
Hello,
it can be
Brianna.
hard support
Hey,
wise.
hello, Brianna. We're just coming back. It sounds like
Yeah.
you've said some wonderful things, but we're gonna respect people's time and
Of
what
course.
over time. So thank you everyone for joining us. We're gonna end today's webinar, but you will get the recordings. You are gonna of the main show. We decided to make the breakout rooms private, and then you get all the links and all the information. But thank you so much for everyone joining us, and thank you to Ricardo. Thank you to Maria and Katie and Jack for being our guests today. But yeah, so it was so good to see everyone. I hope you guys have a good day.
Thank you for this information. It was helpful, and I will be sharing it, passing it along to anyone that can use the information. Thank you.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Oh, Brianna, Katie just
Yeah.
dropped the link to the tax webinar. So you mentioned a
Okay.
lot earlier on about taxes, so give that a
Yes.
look and see if that's helpful.
Okay, let me see. Is it one that's coming up, or one that was already?
Already happened. There's a
Okay.
recording and a bunch of like resource docs in there.
I don't
So
know if
feel
that's
free to
It says on your request access.
shoot. Just press request access and I'll approve it.
Yeah.
It should be.
All right.
I might have done the wrong kind of link.
Yeah, maybe.
I think it is the correct link, Katie, but I noticed today I had no access to the public folder anymore.
What the heck?
So
Okay. We're full of technical difficulties. I give
All
up.
good.
But just request access. If you're ever trying to click on our stuff, I'll give you access.
Yeah. I appreciate it, and I believe I'm getting the emails from the from you guys. So if there's any other training opportunities, webinars, any other in-person events that come up, I know there's the in DC next year. I'm gonna see if my YAB can get funding for us to go, for the board members for our YAB, because that would be pretty cool.
Great, great. I know things have changed a lot, but we usually say it's typically HUD approved. And so if you can talk to your continuum care ahead of time, they might be able to utilize some of their planning dollars. Maybe, I don't know what life looks like at those programs right now, but that might be worthwhile to have a conversation with them down to see what we done.
The only thing for budget, we're losing $400 out of our budget next year for one thing, so don't know about the rest, but hopefully we'd be able to go. That would be a good opportunity. Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Good day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Panelists, stay on just for 1 minute since we're already so over. We're just going to literally do like a 2-minute debrief.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Have a good day, you all. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Diamond. Thanks for note taking. I guess we could also go backstage if we want to.
I am a little nervous about all these technical difficulties.
You know.
Let's just give it one moment. Yeah, and I think we can remove individuals too. They just